Brian, tell us your full name and your company this morning.
My name is Brian Young, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Home Lending Pal.
So tell me about Home Lending Pal.
Yeah, so we're building artificial intelligence that helps individuals understand their likelihood for approval and the hidden cost of home ownership before you actually apply for a mortgage.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think I saw you. Last. Gosh, was that July? You did a pitch night. I think.
I did a pitch night in July, which we won that one, and we're getting ready to do the Get in the Ring Miami next week.
A little bit closer to the mic.
Getting ready to do Get in the Ring Miami for next week, and we have a bunch of other pitches across the country that we're getting ready to go to. So
now, correct me if I'm wrong. This isn't your first startup.
No, this is my. It is not. I don't know why I'm.
Do you have a problem?
I do. I think I need help and medical help as well. But this is my fifth company. I've successfully exited from 4 others before this, and for some reason I decided to move to Miami and start another one. I was crazy for that.
Okay, so you just started a conversation. Moved to Miami from where?
From North Carolina. I'm originally a military brat, so I mean we traveled all over the world, but I'm originally from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Okay. So you've thrown some interesting psychology into this conversation. So military brat means you likely probably went from one high school to another 2 or 3 different times through school, and you had to be fast on your feet, and you had to make friends quickly, and how much of an impact did that have on where you are today? Absolutely. I mean, we pretty much moved every 3 years almost.
Sure.
And there was times where I went to 4 or 5 different schools within one school year. I mean, that was kind of normal. But I think, just being introduced to different cultures is really something that you have to be able to get ingrained with when you're talking about, military kids. And you have to be willing to be open and meet new people all the time. So
Curiosity,
and it got the best of me.
Well, and I tell people, I've been accused of being the luckiest human being anyone's ever met, and after dodging the cancer bullet last year, I'm starting to buy into that narrative. But my dad beat luck into my head, and my dad was a big promoter of, he said, you got to be curious. I can remember growing up at a racetrack, and my dad would talk to the alcoholics that would come to the track in the morning to clean out stalls. And Dad says, I know every horse in this track. It's curiosity. Yeah. It's taking the time to talk to anybody. And that's what you learn growing up. And that makes for a very useful tool set in being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because as an entrepreneur, now you've got to smash together people from all different walks of life. And here we are in this 21st century where through social media, wow, then you throw multicultural, multi-continental. I mean, so tell me about where you are in your process. I mean, okay, so you've got the tool set. You've obviously been through this, multiple times. So what are you doing? Are you staffing up? Are you working on the tech side? What are you playing with?
We are staffing up. We're getting ready to launch in March. So it took us 2.5 years just to even bring a product to market.
Sure.
So you talk about, having dedication and consistency and wanting to build something, wanting to do something that is going to potentially help a lot of people.
Sure.
There was a lot of red tape that we had to go through, a lot of policies that we had to get changed. And you're talking about, this small startup trying to convince large enterprises to change things. And we kind of talk about it, big cruise ships and small, narrow straits in the sense of getting them to change and move has been really hard. But we've stayed with it, and it's been very interesting in that regard.
So, of course, people talk about the why, in the entrepreneur world, what's your why? What's your motivation? Well, that's easy. I'm passionate about this. I started this, and this is what I'm doing. Okay, so the next step is what I have noticed in my own life is that the defining factor between success and failure comes down to the difference between wanting to succeed and needing to succeed. Now, I realize that you're not, first venture, ground floor, just figuring this out. You've been through this before. So I'm not trying to, do the mindset coach thing here, but what I really want to know is that what is your need? What drives you? Is it the almighty dollar? Is it changing the world?
No, I think after a while you learn that money isn't really a good way to drive yourself at all, because it doesn't keep you up at night, it keeps you up at night, but it doesn't wake you up every morning. I think for me, it's just being able to impact lives, to change lives, and to really make decisions and control my future, my destiny on my own. Nothing against corporate America, but you do have times where, and I've been involved in those, where you go work for a large corporation and you're doing your job very well, but because of, a budget cut or, sales marks being missed, the entire department got laid off, and that has nothing to do with you. So for me, I think, just having the ability to control my future is really important to me. So,
well, and I think that's the reality of the 21st century. Oxford University pumped out a white paper, or I assume it was a white paper, some sort of a paper a couple of weeks ago that said, yeah, we pretty much confirmed it. 47% of the jobs in America are going to be gone in the next 10 or 15 years. And when you just said, I want to be in charge of my own destiny, I think this is really where we are as a culture. I think we're at an inflection point that, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 50. You went to college, you got a degree, you got a job, you got married, you bought a house, you started a family, you worked the same company for 20 or 30 years. I mean, coming out of the educational system in the 70s and the 80s, it was Al Bundy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was pretty much, we had this figured out. And somehow, in the past 30 years of my life, somehow that has all changed. And however, we still have people in our culture who still go through this, I call it the Wile E. Coyote, the out over the cliff, the legs are still moving and, the bottom hasn't fallen out. There are still people in this world who have this mindset that they are going to take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get a job and my boss is going to love me and the company's going to appreciate me and they are going to give me a raise and then I'm going to be able to raise a family. And that's just not real.
Yeah.
That's just not real. And to some degree, I feel, I feel a little guilty about that because growing up as a Gen Xer, I mean, I guess I didn't really even appreciate the opportunities that were afforded to me.
Yeah.
Coming out of the 80s, my very first membership that I bought on the Kansas City Board of Trade was $47,500. Sounded like a lot of money in 1994, but the 50-year-old Gary looks at that and goes, man, I wish I could go back and do that again. That was the cheapest franchise I ever owned in my life. So what you are saying is that your mindset, what drives you and where you're at is that you're going to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I think it's independence. I mean, and you have a lot of people that look at social media and the lives that people live on social media, and they basically live vicariously through other people. But there's nothing to stop you from doing that yourself. You go work for a big corporation and you get maybe 20 days of PTO a year.
Yeah.
For me, having lived in Japan and other places around the world, it's like, I want to see the world, and that's very hard to do when you only have 20 days of PTO a year. So,
well, let's throw one at you. Not to get away from, I want to talk about your business plan a little bit here more. But you just hit on one that I think is really fascinating that I stumbled across the other day. It said, in the next, I believe it was 20 years, there will be over 1 billion digital nomads. And I doubt whether many of the viewers know what a digital nomad is, but I will delve into that a little bit, is basically you could still be gainfully employed working someplace in a hostel in Bali and might be working for a tech company in Silicon Valley in California. And that business model going forward, being in the tech world, I think is probably going to be what your generation is going to crave. Because it's like, okay, cool. I'll make a living. I can do my job, but I want the freedom. And if you don't give me freedom, then I'll just be self-employed. I won't be part of this. But to steer back to your business plan. So you go live this spring, and then what happens?
Hopefully we grow.
Okay.
You never really know. I mean, we have about 15,000 people on our wait list right now. So there is a little bit of demand for what we're doing. But we still have a lot of work to do. We need to make sure that you talk about kind of artificial intelligence and what we're doing. We need to make sure that our projections, our predictions are accurate.
Yep.
We need to there's still a lot of red tape that we have to uncut, or when it comes to, access to FICO scores and even more information as far as pertaining to your financial accounts and things like that. And then also there's trust that we have to make sure that we're building with consumers, which is the most important part of what we're doing.
Sure.
Building that trust and transparency. So I think a lot of people think, I launch a company and that's it. Really, that's really just the beginning of a very long roller coaster.
Long roller coaster. I had a guy in here that I interviewed earlier this morning, and I told him that, the day that I got funded was great, but at that point in time, the romance kind of was gone. Now it's like, okay, well, you spent 10 years talking about the success story, and then, oh wow, now I got to go to work.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. This is the first company I've ever gotten outside funding for.
Okay.
And, you talk about the initial high of getting funding, and it's like, oh yeah, I got money. Someone gave me money. Someone believed in my idea, and then the very next moment, you're like, well, now I got to go make their money back.
That's right.
Now I have weekly investor calls where I have to give status updates and progress updates, and first thing they say is, okay, when are we going to start making money? And it's just like, well, hopefully soon.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. That's the plan. Yeah. So, but I guess when you talk about launching, that's kind of what's important to them. But for us, it's more so ensuring that we're helping the borrowers. Right. There aren't a lot of things out there that really help borrowers in that sense. So, that's important for us. And then you talk about the remote aspect of what we're doing. That's how we've grown our team to 10 people, and it started with just 2, me and my co-founder. But by, looking at people that may be in, well, we don't have anyone in Iowa, we have Texas right now, but, giving people in different areas of the country a chance to come work for us, it's allowed us to attract much higher quality talent than we would in New York or San Francisco. So
absolutely. And, and that's happened to me in my lifetime. Once again, the previous interview, we were joking that, he had a guy send him an email one time and goes, you're probably the only person that sends me an email at 2:00 in the morning. But, when you got a satellite team, I don't care how many hours a day you work.
At all.
If you work 4 and you get everything done, then you're just really good.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to bust your chops. I had a lot of people in my team where it'd be like, you're where?
Right.
Are you on PTO? Should I check your calendar?
Right,
Did I, oh my God, did I call you when you're on vacation? No, you're at the beach. Oh, okay. Well, when are you going to get that report done?
Exactly.
Oh, when you get back from the beach. Okay. And if you're cool with that, you can get amazing production out of people.
You have to be. And when we talk about some of the red tape that we had to overcome, that was actually one of the biggest things, when you look at, getting personal information as far as credit, one of the first things Equifax wants to do is send a team to actually do an audit of your office building. And I was like, well, that's going to be a little bit of a problem for us because we don't actually have an office technically. So they actually created a special program for us in that regard. But our CTO, he's going to Asia again. He loves going to Asia. And it's just like, well, as long as you're making meetings, as long as the work is getting done, we're meeting deadlines, I don't really care where you're at. And I think that's really one of the things.
Shared files, shared calendars.
Exactly. Video conferences. So, just make sure that you're there, and I don't care. And I think that's really one of the biggest things that we've had to make sure everyone understands about. That's one of the culture things that we don't want to change in our company. So.
Sure. And, you hit on something a second ago that I think is very, very important is you were talking about the investor calls, the weekly investor calls. And I've given a lot of thought to this. I mean, I have laid in bed and I've thought about what was the perfect situation, what was the imperfect situation. I've had the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I know that I'm looking for a unicorn here when I talk about this. But from my perspective, I think that founders who have had successful exits are your absolute best person for someone like you to get involved. Okay. And, and I don't want to talk about monies here today. That's not cool on social media. But my point is not just bring a checkbook, but bring the wisdom, bring the experience. Brian, you just hit on something. I remember 25 years ago, I had a guy came to me and told me he was really excited. He's like, my wife's pregnant. And it was one of the saddest moments for me looking back because I realized I reacted really poorly because in my mind, I thought, you're going to want to raise.
Yeah. That's usually the case.
And you just hit on that. You got 9 mortgages.
I have 9 other mortgages I have to worry about. And, these guys are committing so much time to, at this stage, still an idea.
That's right.
We're funded, but we're still an idea. We're not truly a in the many senses, a business just yet. And I think so many people get the idea that, I'm going to have employees that come work for me and I'm going to delegate everything. I'm going to be the one that makes everything happen. And really, when you talk about the leader mentality, it's more so hiring people that are smarter than you and then trusting them to be able to do their job basically.
The trust part is the hard part, because what I've experienced is that in the startup world, you have groupies.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to learn this one the hard way. And it was a brutal lesson for me. The problem that you have is you have people that will chase startups because they may not possess the instincts or the self-efficacy or the vision, but they want to get rich.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to get rich off of your idea. And, bringing in that right group of people and making sure that you don't have a hidden narcissist, that closet saboteur. And I've had to live through those toxic relationships, and they suck.
Yeah.
Because you bring people in and you want to trust them, and you do trust them. And the problem is when you trust somebody and you get 12 or 18 months down the road and you realize, oh my God, what they did was complete crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are tough investor phone calls.
It's scary. Very tough. And I think so many people get so caught up in, I'm only going to share the positive sides of business that, I'm not going to share my failures. And I've learned the most from all my failures. I mean, I've had four exits, but when you talk about, my learning experience, none of them are related to the exits. I can tell you, as you said, mistakes that I made, things that I didn't do right.
Yeah.
Hires that weren't the right fit for the company, raises that were given that shouldn't have been given, and even personal mistakes of how I had to learn how to lead other people. I wasn't always the guy that trusted people.
No.
There was a point in my career where it was like, oh, well, this needs to get done, I'm gonna do it myself.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn how to be better in that regard, and that's taken a lot of experience. You have to be open to constructive criticism, and so many people are like, oh, well, if you're giving me criticism and you just don't like my idea, or the younger kids will say you're a hater. But I don't really think that that's true in business. You have to, like you said earlier, you have to find mentors that know where you're trying to go, and then be willing to listen. And there's so many people that, oh, well, I have a mentor, but I ask them questions and they give me answers, but I don't really listen to their answers fully to actually execute those answers, so.
Well, and you said something here about younger people that work for you, and back to your 9 mortgages. People that work for you have the right to ask.
Yeah. Because
they're signing on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like John Wayne and the Cowboys, the movie The Cowboys.
Yeah.
I mean, you're Xing your name. I'm on for the cattle drive all the way to Texas, or all the way to Kansas or whatever. But the point is, they have the right to ask. And I hear people in the corporate environment go, well, these millennials, they just ask too many questions. They ask a lot of questions because they're skeptical.
Yeah.
Because they've been lied to. I mean, we've been, the boomers and the Gen Xers have been selling a lot of stories that may not necessarily be true.
Yeah.
And so, the 21st century is going to be the century of the entrepreneur. There's going to be millions and millions of people just like you out there creating jobs. And it's going to become a new mindset for people. To go to college and get out of college and not be able to find a job is a new reality. And so I'm hoping that people can learn a little bit of something from this podcast that can make that valuable from people like yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up a good question or a good point, and I think it leads into another question I had another guy ask me yesterday, which is, millennials ask questions, and you look at the current mortgage process. If I have questions, I'm supposed to go to someone that's intended to sell me a product to give me unbiased answers. It doesn't work like that, which is why our product was created. But I had someone ask me yesterday, okay, well, when you're looking to start a company, how do you come up with ideas? And, my thing to them is, Find stuff that is broken.
That's right.
And find multiple people that think it's broken, and then find a fix for it.
I joke with people. I ask guys in corporate America all the time, do you have a CDO? And they're like, what's a CDO? Chief Disrupting Officer.
Yeah.
That's your opportunity guy. That's your rainmaker.
Yeah.
And that's that difference in that mindset between a leader and a manager. And if you're running a disruptive business model and running a disruptive company, and you've got a manager mentality, your Chief Disrupting Officer is going to make you very nervous.
Very.
Because their whole mindset is they're like a heat-seeking missile.
You know, it's funny because I even though I've had, you know, entrepreneurial ventures, I've also went corporate to see kind of what the other side was like. And majority of my job was basically change, and people don't like change. You know, when you go into a corporation and your job is basically to find what's broken and then give ideas to fix it. Many people get so complacent and comfortable in their comfort zone. They're just like, oh, now you're making my job harder, which in many cases you're actually simplifying what they're doing. But it's just kind of getting people out of that comfort zone is really hard.
Absolutely. And that's where we are in America as at a very high level is we're at an inflection point in our economy. We're at an inflection point in our society. We're a species that in the next few decades we're eventually going to be two separate species.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be a humanoid species evolving outer space. It's going to be different than us. That's just inevitable. The point is that we're going through a lot of major changes.
Absolutely.
And as a parent, if you're one of those people that doesn't do well with change, if you want to make sure that your kids live in the basement for the rest of their lives, tell them to go to college and do exactly what you did, because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And that's this disruption. There's a wave of disruption coming. I mean, if we terminate 50% of the jobs in America over the next decade or so, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, but I look at that and I go, that's opportunity.
That's opportunity. You know, and it's funny because, you know, coming from a military background, and trying to be an entrepreneur when I was younger, you know, I started trying to be an entrepreneur when I was like 11 or 12, you know, with the lawn care company. My mom wasn't a fan of it, you know, coming from, you know, she was born in the 60s. So it's kind of that, like you said earlier, the mentality of, you know, get a job, work for a corporation for 20 years. And then the idea of entrepreneurship, when you talk about kind of the military environment, which is very structured, very, you know, I tell you to do this, you do it, you know, it was not taken well. This is really the first company that she's seen and she's really supported in the sense of, I believe this will work. And it was primarily because she had a bad experience trying to get a home. So,
well, that's one of the hard parts about being an entrepreneur is you're always crazy.
You're always crazy. And I tell people, you know, it's a roller coaster. You can't get too high. You can't get too low. But, you know, if there's things that you have to do on a daily basis, it's practice gratitude.
Oh,
you know,
man.
Every morning you wake up, just be thankful for something.
You have to have a need. One isn't good enough. You know, I hear young people say, well, I'm going to work for this startup for a while, and if it doesn't work, I can always use my college degree.
Yeah.
Well, then don't waste anybody's time.
Yeah.
Because you're not serious. But on the flip side of the coin is you need the need, because the need is what gets you through the days when you get kicked in the face. You know, I remember, not to get off on my Gary stories, but I remember a particular experience that I had. I had a flour milling company that I had a warehouse in Kansas City. And I had a large order that was supposed to show up, and we were supposed to distribute it out in multiple trucks, and they were supposed to go out in different directions, and it was all just-in-time delivery and yada, yada. The original truck didn't show up.
Oh, man.
And so, you know, I had to pay shipping on a bunch of trucks that were sitting out in the yard, and it was a big old mess. And I remember I went to the Quick Trip, and I got a 6-pack of beer at about 10 o'clock in the morning, went back to the warehouse and sat down on a pallet of flour and drank some beers. Those are rough days.
Rough days.
Those are really rough days to call up a customer and say, I'm sorry. You can't make tortillas today because the product didn't show up. But, you know, you can't give up.
Yeah. I think so many people have a misconception. You know, everybody wants the sausage, but nobody wants to see how the sausage is made. You know, so I have a lot of friends that think, you know, this entrepreneurship is just this grand.
Well, sure. They saw the headlines from Tesla, or not Tesla, but Uber and Lyft.
Yeah, they'll see those headlines, or, you know, you'll see, you know, stuff like this where we're talking. It's the positive side of it, but you know, they don't see the countless hours they put in, or, you know, the time spent away from family, or when everyone else is going out celebrating, you're not, or even the fact that, you know, when you're building a company, everyone thinks you have so much money. You know, you make these large announcements about these capital raises, and everyone's like, oh, okay, you're rolling in the money now. You can hire me. You can.
No, you're not.
No, I'm usually the cheapest paid employee at the company. And usually if someone's not going to get paid, I'm usually the first one that's not getting paid, you know, so.
I went 7 years without a paycheck on my last build.
I believe it. You know, even with my last company, you know, I had a digital marketing agency for about 9.5 years, and I think I was the cheapest employee there for a majority of that time. You know, we didn't really make money until we ended the company, or we sold it. We got the company acquired, which is really tough because, you know, everyone, and even with this company, you know, we're doing well, and you know, I'm still thinking about, you know, how can I cut my expenses to be able to bring higher quality talent on board. So
manage your rate of burn so you can bring one more body on.
Yeah. So
and they're done that.
It's a balancing act. And I think a lot of people don't see that, but they see the end result, which is, like you said, the Ubers, the Lyfts, and hearing about, these grand, acquisitions or selling the company. They don't realize that, when you're really trying to start a company, there's a lot of sacrifices that go into it that are just lifestyle changes that you're not used to. When I was on this big corporate salary, I could do all these different things, but now it's just like, I'm even thinking about right now, like, should I move back home and with mom just so I can ensure that I can make the company last an extra month?
That's right. Shave another $1,000 or $2,000 a month.
Right. So
the previous guy was in here talking, and I said that, in the past 30 years of my life, I have slept in my SUV, I am sure, a year.
Yeah.
People talk about being homeless. I'm like, dude, I had sleeping in an SUV down to science. I had the foam mattress. I knew exactly where my bottle of water went. I knew my phone went over in this holder. I mean, I could sleep. Funny story on that was, and I want you to come back. I want to hear updates because I've been impressed with your story and just from day one. But I want to tell you a little funny story about sleeping in the back of my SUV. I was in Janesville, Wisconsin. I was going to Lake Geneva to meet with some people, and stayed in Janesville, Wisconsin, middle of the wintertime. Pulled in between two trucks, back in the very back corner of the truck parking lot. And I wake up the next morning and I was just completely freaked out because it was just pitch black. And I knew it was daylight because I looked at my watch. It snowed a foot that night. And
wow.
My vehicle was just in this little cocoon. And I kicked the door open and snow falls in on me. And I'm like, yeah, CEO.
That is funny.
Yeah,
that is
CEO.
Funny.
Yeah, I wonder if all CEOs enjoy it like that.
Oh man, it's rough.
The truck stop showers and brushing your teeth, and
right
in the quick trip,
eating oodles and noodles, and the steak dinners are only for when you're entertaining clients, basically.
Little wonder I've got 2 ex-wives. Brian, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.